In Veneto, it is said that when a bad man dies, he wakes up on Poveglia. At first glance, this refuge of the damned, a small island located a few hundred meters from the Lido, looks perfectly pleasant. A blanket of green from which a large building overlooked by a charming bell tower emerges. In other words, it is altogether more appealing than the soulless buildings that front the sandbar across the water. As one approaches the island, this initial impression changes completely, and a sense of unease sets in. The roofs have collapsed, the windows have been ripped out, the walls are cracked, and the whole structure is being overtaken by rampant vegetation. How can such a place, just 10 minutes by boat from the splendors of the Serenissima, a corner of the earth that until the 14th century accommodated several hundred families, produced salt and a much-enjoyed wine, and indeed flourished to such an extent that for a while it had its own autonomous government, simply have been abandoned? As a symbol of its disgrace, Poveglia now enjoys the dubious distinction of being the only place in the Venetian lagoon not served by public transport. The Vaporetto from San Zaccaria to Chioggia, line 19, is happy to contribute to the steady erosion of the island shoreline without ever stopping there. Although Poveglia may be little visited, it is much spoken of. Indeed, talk of this island has spread beyond the borders of Europe, and it now enjoys a reputation as one of the most haunted places on the planet, thanks to the 160,000 bodies believed to be buried in these few acres of ground to which over the centuries victims of the plague and lepers were deported, and where a psychiatric hospital and then an old age home were later built. It is said that the souls of the plague-stricken roam the island in such large numbers that they have disturbed the minds of the living, notably the one-time director of the hospital, who is said to have been subject to bouts of madness that led him to conduct dubious experiments on and bump off numbers of his patients, and eventually to commit suicide by throwing himself from the campanile. The archives of the municipality of Venice, however, are more tight-lipped than the legend. They offer no evidence of any enforced exile of either Black Death or leprosy sufferers to Poveglia. Might not the rumour mill have confused Poveglia with another islet, known as Lazzaretto Vecchio, which played a similar role in days gone by? And neither do the records shed any light on the opening of a psychiatric hospital on the island. They simply record dryly that in the 18th century the island passed into the control of the health authorities, who used it as a quarantine station for boats arriving from the open sea before they received permission to moor in Venice itself. It then accommodated a care and rest home for former members of Venetian crews, before eventually, in the 20th century, welcoming retired folk from all walks of life. Nowhere can any mention be found of a mad doctor. The centre closed in 1968, after which time it received only the occasional visit from wine growers who came to tend the vines. The only verifiable drama in the island's history is its utter abandonment. However, not everyone will be convinced by the dry facts presented by the official documents, not when legend tells such a different story.